Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden mathematical forces that totally dictate business pricing and, well, our everyday choices. Seriously, every time you buy a coffee, book a flight, or upgrade your phone, you're actually participating in this massive, invisible web of economic calculations. And in this explainer, we're going to decode exactly how that works. So to understand just how powerful these forces really are, I want to take you back to 2019. Look at the dramatic collapse of jet airways. Here was an airline operating in Asia's incredibly fast-growing aviation industry. Specifically, they were in India, which was one of the fastest expanding, most heavily populated markets on the entire planet. We're talking about millions upon millions of potential flyers. A genuinely booming market. Yet despite having access to the sheer unmatched scale of passengers, they failed completely and were just grounded. And the fallout, it was absolutely massive. We're talking 23,000 employees losing their jobs literally overnight. And it wasn't just the pilots and flight attendants, The ripple effects hit catering, airport services, and maintenance crews incredibly hard. The culprit behind all this chaos? Intense competition and rock-bottom airfares. They were trying to compete not just with other airlines, but with the Indian Railways, which offered a much cheaper alternative for travelers.
Right, so that brings us to this fascinating mystery. Why did cheap tickets ruin them? I mean, it seems like a total paradox, doesn't it? They lowered prices, which naturally attracted a lot more passengers, but instead of saving the company, selling so many cheap tickets actually resulted in catastrophic financial losses that completely destroyed this massive airline. To solve this mystery, we've got to understand the fundamental economic rule they ran blindly into.
Okay, let's dive into Section 1. What is elasticity? Let's look at the core economic concept that answers our airline mystery. Elasticity. It's a term you've probably heard tossed around in business meetings or the news, but understanding what it truly means, that gives you a literal superpower in predicting market behavior. At its core, elasticity is just a measure of responsiveness. It tells us how much one variable reacts when you change another variable, assuming all other things remain equal. See, economists and business owners don't just want to know if demand will change when they raise a price. That's way too basic. They need to know exactly how big that change is going to be. Are they going to lose 10 customers or 10,000? What's really interesting here is how you can think of consumer demand just like a rubber band's ball. Some products are incredibly stretchy. If you poke them with just a tiny price increase, the demand stretches and snaps back dramatically as people just stop buying. But other products, they are stubborn. You can stretch and pull that price all you want, and the demand barely even budges. And that leads us to our two major categories. On one side, we've got elastic demand. This is where a small change in price leads to a massive reaction in the quantity demanded. If the price goes up a little, people absolutely abandon ship. On the other side, we have inelastic demand. This is when even a huge, painful change in price causes only a tiny shift in consumer buying habits. People just keep buying it anyway, muttering under their breath as they hand over their credit cards. Moving right along to Section 2, calculating price elasticity. So, how do we actually measure this stretchiness? Don't panic, we are going to look at the math, but I promise we'll keep it beautifully simple. We're going to focus purely on how consumers react to the price tags they see on the shelves. This is the formula for the price elasticity of demand, or PED. It is simply the percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in the price. Now, because of the law of demand, where a price goes up, demand usually goes down, this formula typically gives us a negative number. But economists generally just ignore the negative sign and focus on the raw numerical value to tell us the absolute size of the reaction. Let's see this formula in action. Look at two totally unrelated products, A and B. Both start at $100, selling 1,000 units. Now, we apply a 5% price increase to both, bringing the price to $105. Look at product A. Demand barely budged, falling just 1% to 990 units. You divide 1 by 5, and you get a PED of 0.2 that is less than 1, so it's highly inelastic. But product B, its demand plummeted by 10%, dropping down to 900 units. 10 divided by 5 gives a PED of 2.0. That's greater than 1, meaning product B is highly elastic. All right, Section 3, the shape of demand. Now that we've crunched the numbers, let's visualize what this mathematical stretchiness actually looks like on a graph. Seeing the shape of demand makes it instantly clear how different products behave in the wild. Check out this completely vertical line. This represents perfectly inelastic demand, where the PED is exactly 0. Notice how no matter how high the price goes on the vertical axis, $10, $11, $12, the quantity on the horizontal axis stays permanently locked at 100.
This happens in the real world with things like life-saving medication. If you need insulin to survive, you're going to buy the exact same amount whether the price goes up or down. Now let's flip that entirely on its head to perfectly elastic demand, represented by this completely horizontal line. In this extreme scenario, at a price of exactly $9, people will buy everything available. But if the seller raises the price by even 1 single cent, boom, demand instantly drops to absolute zero. The percentage change in quantity is literally infinite for even the tiniest tweak in price. Next up, we have this beautifully sweeping curve known as unit elastic demand. Here, a rise in price is matched by an exact, mathematically proportional fall in quantity demanded. If the price goes up 5%, the quantity demanded drops exactly 5%. Because the changes are perfectly proportional, the PED value here is exactly 1. Here's the golden rule, though. On a normal, straight-line, downward demand curve, elasticity doesn't actually stay the same. It changes depending on exactly where you are on the line. Think about it. At the top of the curve, prices are already high and quantities are low. If you drop the price by $1, that single dollar is a very small percentage of a high price, but it results in a huge percentage jump in that small quantity. Therefore, the top of the curve is highly elastic. Conversely, at the bottom, prices are already low and quantities are high. That same $1 change is now a massive percentage of a low price, but it barely registers against the huge quantity. So demand at the bottom is highly inelastic. Let's look at Section 4, Factors Influencing Price Elasticity. Let's step away from the charts for a minute and get back to the real world. Why does any of this actually happen? What makes a product stretchy and elastic or stubborn and inelastic in our minds? Well, two of the biggest factors are brand loyalty and the availability of substitutes, and this brilliantly illustrates it. On the left, an Apple Watch. Strong brands create incredibly inelastic demand. Apple users love their ecosystem. If the price goes up, they aren't likely to just buy a cheaper generic brand. But on the right, soft drinks. This market is packed with close substitutes. If your favorite cola gets too expensive, you can effortlessly switch to another brand on the exact same shelf. That makes the demand for one specific brand of soda highly elastic. And you know what? This right here is exactly why Jet Airways collapsed. They were selling flights, but passengers could easily substitute them for cheap Indian Railway train tickets. Their demand was so incredibly elastic that they had to match rock-bottom prices just to keep seats filled, which completely wiped out their profit margins. Time is also a massive factor in elasticity. Let's look at how this builds. Think about petrol. In the short run, say this week, if gas prices spike, your demand is inelastic. You still have to drive to work, so you just grit your teeth and pay the higher price. You can't change your habits instantly. But in the long run, over a few years, people adapt. They buy fuel-efficient cars, switch to electric vehicles, or start taking the train. Given enough time, demand becomes so much more elastic. And finally, Section 5, Income Elasticity and Goods. Because hey, price isn't the only thing that changes our buying habits, right? Our paychecks do too. This brings us to another brilliant tool economists use, the income elasticity of demand, or YED. Instead of looking at price changes, we're now looking at how our demand shifts when our income goes up or down. Based on how we react to having more money, economists categorize everything into 4 types of goods. First are normal goods like smartphones. When you earn more, you buy more of them. Second are inferior goods like cheap instant noodles. When you get richer, you actually buy less of these because you upgrade your food. And then we can break normal goods down even further into necessities and luxuries. Let's take luxury goods first, like designer bags. Luxuries have a high income elasticity, meaning the YED is greater than 1. When a consumer's income rises, their demand for luxury goods absolutely skyrockets. It completely outpaces their income growth. Think about it. When you get a huge promotion at work, upgrading your lifestyle with designer clothes, new tech gadgets, or high-end jewelry suddenly becomes incredibly attractive, and your demand stretches rapidly. But contrast those exciting luxuries with necessity goods, like bulk rice. Necessities have an income elasticity that is positive, but very close to 0. Why? Because if you get a massive bonus at work, you don't suddenly go home and eat 10 times more rice for dinner. Your demand for staple foods, water, and basic electricity remains almost exactly the same, no matter how wealthy you become. So, wrapping up this explainer, look at your own life and your recent purchases. Are the things you're buying elastic luxuries that you drop if times got tough, or inelastic necessities you simply can't live without? Next time a massive company collapses or your favorite coffee shop raises its prices, you won't just see a basic business decision. You're going to see the invisible math of elasticity, pulling the strings behind human behavior.
Keep learning, stay focused, and we'll see you in the next one.